Isolated by sanctions, he commands a massive nuclear arsenal and oversees the largest European conflict since World War II. Yet the man managing this immense disruption is the exact same leader who came to power promising to end one. To understand that pivot, we have to look back to 1989. The Berlin Wall fell, communist governments across Eastern Europe collapsed, and by 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved completely. The aftermath left millions of citizens adrift. The state economy fractured, leading to hyperinflation and desperate lines for basic goods as a superpower vanished. Out of this instability emerged Vladimir Putin. Raised in a cramped communal apartment in post-war Leningrad, he was a disciplined former KGB officer who had internalized the harsh lessons of scarcity. On the final day of 1999, an exhausted Boris Yeltsin abruptly resigned. He handed control of a staggering nation over to his prime minister. A fragmented society, tired of economic freefall and lost status, willingly placed its future in the hands of a quiet bureaucrat, simply because he offered a return to order. This chart shows the parallel rise of global crude oil prices and Russia's GDP between 1999 and 2008. As energy markets surged, Putin instituted tax reforms. Average incomes rose, state revenues climbed, and Russia paid off its foreign debt years ahead of schedule. Simultaneously, he directed an unforgiving military campaign against separatist groups in Chechnya. The rubble of Grozny cemented his image among Russians as a leader who would use absolute force to maintain territorial integrity. With his popularity high, he began restructuring the government itself. His administration systematically reduced the autonomy of regional governors and targeted the wealthy business elites who had hoarded power during the privatization years. When armed militants seized a school in Beslan in September 2004, resulting in the deaths of over 330 people, Putin utilized the crisis to justify sweeping security reforms. He argued that combating terrorism required even tighter federal oversight. By delivering rising paychecks and putting down domestic rebellions, he forged a clear social contract with the public. They traded political competition and civil liberties for the guarantee of national survival. The Russian constitution at the time limited presidents to 2 consecutive terms. In 2008, Putin shifted to the role of prime minister, while Dmitry Medvedev took the presidency, keeping Putin in ultimate control without violating the strict letter of the law. Months later, Russian armored columns rolling into Georgia signaled a massive shift. The rebuilt state was now confident enough to deploy military force beyond its borders. Following political unrest in Ukraine in 2014, unmarked soldiers took control of the Crimean Peninsula. The rapid annexation fractured relations with Western nations and triggered heavy economic sanctions. The following year, Russian forces intervened in Syria to back Bashar al-Assad, proving Moscow could successfully project military power deep into the Middle East. The highly centralized apparatus initially constructed to hold a collapsing Russia together was now being pointed outward to aggressively challenge global borders. By 2020, nationwide constitutional amendments reset the clock on his previous terms. The legal barrier to indefinite rule was effectively removed. In February 2022, Russian forces crossed the border from multiple directions, launching a massive, full-scale invasion of Ukraine. This network map visualizes the immediate economic blowback. Western nations froze Russian assets and severed major banks from the SWIFT international payment system, turning financial connection lines dark. Simultaneously, hundreds of international corporations abandoned the domestic market, draining capital and technology out of the country. The security strategy also backfired. The conflict pushed historically non-aligned nations like Finland and Sweden straight into the NATO alliance. The prolonged war generated intense domestic friction. In June 2023, the Wagner Group launched a short-lived armed rebellion, capturing military facilities and marching toward Moscow before turning back. Despite these immense pressures, the government adapted. They ramped up domestic production and aggressively redirected energy exports toward Asian markets, building vital economic lifelines with leaders like China's Xi Jinping. The disciplined boy from Leningrad succeeded in his initial mission to rebuild a shattered state. Yet, the absolute authority he constructed to achieve it has isolated his nation and rewritten global security, cementing his legacy as a highly polarizing architect of power.